It is Sunday, August 16th, 2026, and this is The High Road. I'm Elena Rossi, and I keep the indemnity ironclad while these folks chase the ticker.
I'm Dan Miller.
Yesterday, we covered market intelligence and bidding trends, Uber Freight cyber incident, and Trimble Arc Agent AI.
Jules Sterling here.
And I'm Buck Reynolds. We have a great show for you today.
Yesterday, we tackled that Uber Freight cyber breach and the thermonuclear shift in carrier liability, specifically that $604 million C.H. Robinson appeal. But today, the focus moves to the physical board, as North American trade strategy hits a massive production spike just as the tariff talk heats up. It's a busy one, you see. And actually, we're also tracking a terrifying new trend in cargo security that should have every fleet manager's hair standing on end.
Look, it's a packed lineup, and the market isn't exactly giving us a weekend pass this time around. Let's get right into the trenches. Here's the play. Mexico is absolutely on fire, but the referees at the border are reaching for their whistles.
Right? I mean, the data coming out of ANPAC today is sort of mind-blowing, isn't it? July heavy-duty vehicle production in Mexico rose by over 51% compared to last year. That's almost 15,000 units in a single month.
And exports are the real kicker there, Jules. I mean, they're up nearly 67% year over year. That's 13,000 trucks crossing the border. The thing is, I've seen this before. We build up all this momentum, and then the policy guys decide to throw a wrench in the gears.
Actually, Buck, it's more than just a wrench. You see, ANPAC is sounding the alarm on those proposed 25% Section 232 tariffs. If those hit, it doesn't matter how many trucks you can build. The cost to get them into a U.S. fleet becomes prohibitive. It's a compliance nightmare, really.
Look, for guys like Freightliner and Kenworth, these aren't just numbers on a page. These are integrated supply chains. You move the engine across the border 3 times before it even sees a chassis, right? If you slap a 25% tax on that every time it touches a line, you're not just raising prices, you're basically benching your star player right before the fourth quarter.
And it's not just the trucks themselves, Dan. Mexico is now officially the #1 trading partner for the U.S., with Laredo handling over $36 billion in freight in June alone. Sort of makes you wonder if we can even afford to stop that flow, right?
Well, that's the deal, isn't it? You got Chicago O'Hare and L.A. ports looking at Laredo's tailpipes now. I mean, I've spent enough time in those border queues to know that the infrastructure can barely handle what we have now. If the trade wars start back up, those rejections index numbers are going to go through the roof.
Well, the outbound tender rejection index for Laredo is already sitting at over 15%, Buck. Actually, that is a massive jump from just 3% last year. If I may, that tells me the capacity is already choking, and we haven't even seen the tariffs hit the ledger yet.
It's the nearshoring paradox, Elena. We want the goods close, but we're making it expensive to get them through the front door. Look, Stone Peak and Greentide are buying up rail-served warehouses like crazy because they know the NAFTA highway is the only game in town, regardless of the noise coming out of D.C.
It always comes back to the real estate, doesn't it? I mean, if you can't park the iron, you can't move the money.
Exactly. And that actually ties into how companies are trying to model this chaos before it happens. I was looking at this news from Optimus Technology. They're launching this prototype for a freight intelligence graph.
I mean, here's the deal with that. Optimus is trying to map out a digital twin of the whole highway network. 350,000 nodes, almost 1 million road segments. They want to predict how a labor strike in Cali messes up the fuel in Iowa 3 days later.
I suppose that sounds impressive. But my thing is, who is validating this data? You see, Optimus has Ed Stockman leading the charge, and they've got a veteran from Amazon, Pasquale, who spent 13 years on routing. but a digital twin is only as good as the physical reality it represents.
Look, Ed Stockman is basically trying to build the Madden for logistics, Elena. You simulate the weather, the traffic, the warehouse delays, and you see the second-order effects before you call the play, right? If it works, you're not just reacting to a bridge closure. You're already rerouting the roster before the driver even hits the seat.
Right? And it covers 400,000 facility locations. Well, okay, if you can see that a specific corridor is about to hit a bottleneck because of a production surge in Mexico, you can actually adjust your sourcing strategy in real time.
Actually, I'm worried about the liability of AI-suggested routes. If a system tells a driver to take a secondary road to avoid a predicted jam and they end up under a low-clearance bridge, that is a risk manager's worst nightmare. I mean, common sense is rarely part of a graph node.
I agree with you there, Elena. A computer doesn't know what a road feels like after a week of heavy rain. But if it can help us understand pressure absorption, like where the capacity is actually hiding, then it's got a place in the cab.
Speaking of where things are hiding, did you see the report from PepsiCo about their procurement multiplier?
That one was wild. Look, they're claiming their strategic sourcing supports 440,000 jobs in the U.S. alone.
Right. For every one direct PepsiCo employee, they're creating 2 additional jobs in logistics and packaging. It sort of proves that procurement isn't just a back office function anymore. It's an economic engine.
Well, that's why everybody is heading to that white and private label expo in New York next month. Companies are desperate to shorten the supply chain. You see GE Appliances doubling their spend with Texas Instruments just to get chips domestic for that Louisville plant. It's about de-risking the inventory, right?
Actually, that GE move is the gold standard for risk mitigation. You see, they aren't just looking for the cheapest chip anymore. They're looking for the chip that actually shows up. Total value over unit price. I suppose even the big retailers are finally reading the Bible of logistics.
It's a total shift toward global manufacturing, sort of keeping it global for the scale, but local for the reliability, right? GE sourcing a third of their semiconductors domestically, that's a huge hedge against the next geopolitical flare-up.
Look, it's about not leaving your lunch money on the table. If you're GE, you can't afford to have a $10 million assembly line sitting idle for a $2 sensor. Before we move on, I actually have to give a quick nod to the people who make this specific show possible.
Right. Strategic logistics requires world-class engineering, and this show is powered by the Stack developed by Eric Christensen at Neural Network Media. Support the architect behind the code. Visit our Patreon at patreon.com/Neural Network Media for a free trial and access to our daily briefing PDF. It's actually the best way to keep up with the data we're discussing here.
Definitely. All right, moving from the factory floor to the high seas. Maersk is talking about a new era of volatility. And let me tell you, their guidance raise isn't just a fluke.
Actually, Maersk's Vincent Clerc is calling it a perfect storm. And for once, I agree with the CEO. You see, we have the Drewry World Container Index rising for the second week in a row. Composite is up to $4,300 per FEU. But look at the Trans-Pacific. Shanghai to New York jumped 10% this week to over $8,700.
$8,000 for a 40-footer? That's highway robbery on the water. Here's the deal. Is that demand, or is that just the carriers gaming the system with blank sailings again?
Well, Maersk says it's a mix. Port congestion is becoming chronic again, and the geopolitical stuff in the Middle East is forcing everyone the long way around. Right? The Shanghai Containerized Freight Index hit 3,300 for the first time in 2 years.
Look, it's a capacity squeeze, Buck. Plain and simple. The carriers are playing a high-stakes game. They limit the roster to maintain high rates. Maersk is more than a shipping line now. They are striving to become the integrator. They want to own the port, the truck, and the warehouse.
That integrator model is a direct attempt to capture the customer relationship and mitigate that very volatility they're reporting. I suppose it's smart, but you see, when one company owns every link in the chain, the systemic risk of a single failure, like a cyber attack, explodes. We saw it yesterday with Uber Freight, right?
Right. And Maersk's North American last mile expansion is sort of the final piece of that puzzle. If they can prove that their upstream visibility makes the last mile cheaper, they win the contract. But the polite shutdown here is that if they can't manage the physical congestion, all that tech doesn't mean a thing.
Well, that's my thing. You can have all the AI in the world, but if there isn't a berth open at the port, that ship is just an expensive parking lot. I mean, the Silicon drivers can't fix a crane breakdown.
Speaking of silicon drivers and AI, we need to talk about this week's main story because the cargo security numbers just hit the wire, and here's the play. It is brutal out there.
I've seen some things on the road, but these new numbers from Verus CargoNet and Overhaul, they're something else. Loss values are up 124% year over year. That's $300 million in Q2 alone.
Actually, Buck, the scariest part isn't the total. It's the average value per load. You see, the average stolen shipment is now worth over $564,000. That's because they aren't just boosting trailers of toilet paper anymore. They're going after data center equipment and industrial copper.
Right? And they're using these bump and run tactics now, sort of testing the driver's response before they make the move. Well, okay, if a driver gets out to check a minor fender bender, the crew is in the cab and the truck is gone in seconds.
Look, it's strategic theft. These guys aren't amateurs. They're reading the manifests. According to the reports, the Southern California red zone, that first 200 miles out of the port, accounts for 38% of all U.S. thefts. It's a targeted blitz, and the industry is playing a prevent defense that isn't working.
Here's the deal. Project 44 just launched this autonomous cargo theft prevention system. They say it uses dynamic geofencing and real-time intervention. Elena, I know you've got thoughts on agentic AI for security.
Actually, I find it cynical, Buck. You see, it is an arms race. If the carriers are using agentic AI to track loads, the thieves are using the same tech to identify the most valuable targets and monitor police frequencies. I suppose it's a mandatory requirement for insurance now, but don't tell me it solves the problem. Physical complacency is still the precursor to catastrophe.
Well, I think the agentic part is key because it removes the human delay, right? If the truck deviates from the path, the AI locks the doors or alerts the authorities instantly. Sort of takes the handshake out of the security protocol, which might be what we need if the fraud is coming from inside the house.
Look, if a load is worth $500,000, you can't rely on a guy checking a spreadsheet every 4 hours, right? You need eyes on every second. FreightWaves is reporting that thieves are even spoofing GPS data now to make the truck look like it's en route while it's being stripped in a warehouse.
Actually, that's exactly my point. If the tech can be spoofed, you're just creating a false sense of security. You see, we need better physical protocols. Driver training, secure parking, actual fences. All the code in the world won't stop a guy with a bolt cutter and a signal jammer.
The old ways still work, Elena. I remember back in the day, we'd nose to tail in the lot so nobody could even get the doors open. But these new crews, they're high tech. If they want that copper, they're going to get it unless we stay one step ahead.
And with the average load value doubling, the insurance premiums are going to follow suit, right? It's sort of a secondary tax on the whole industry. If you can't prove you have dynamic protection, you might not even get coverage for high-value lanes anymore.
It's a mandatory buy-in now. Look, the days of set it and forget it for cargo security are over. You're either in the arms race or you're the target. Now it's time for the week ahead, our Sunday segment where we look at the upcoming calendar and identify the chess moves that will define your margin strategy.
Okay. What's the big one on the roster this week, Dan?
Look, Thursday is the heavy hitter, Walmart Q2 earnings. Look, this is the definitive verdict on whether that early peak we saw in June was a masterstroke or just an inventory bloat. If Walmart says consumer fatigue is setting in, every LTL and dry van carrier needs to tighten their belt for Q4, right? It's the championship game for retail logistics.
I suppose everyone will be watching the EIA Petroleum status report on Wednesday, too. You see, we saw a 9-cent dip in diesel recently, but inventories are still 10% below the 5-year average. If those builds don't show up in the report, that price drop is just a temporary reprieve. It's actually quite volatile.
I mean, the fuel surcharges are eating our lunch. If diesel stays above $5 while the spot rates are soft, we're going to see a lot of owner-operators handing in their keys. Here's the deal. I'm also watching the Cass Freight Index. It usually drops around the 18th.
Exactly, Buck. The Cass Index is our pulse check. If it shows volume recovery, then we know those green shoots are real. Also, look out for Home Depot on Tuesday. They're the bellwether for the flatbed sector. If home improvement is still dormant because of interest rates, the flatbed guys are going to have a rough week.
Sort of feels like a defensive week, right? Well, Dan, you mentioned watching Maersk's port-to-doorstep metrics too?
Look, that's my dark horse pick. Maersk is trying to prove that their integrator model actually reduces last-mile friction. If their data shows even a 5% improvement in transit times, the rest of the industry has to pivot to match them. It's the roster move that could change the whole league. That's the week ahead for this week.
Well, that's all for today's High Road, actually. We've seen that while trade volumes from Mexico are hitting record highs, the industry is simultaneously bracing for a double threat of tariff volatility and a sophisticated cargo theft arms race that has load values exceeding $500,000. I suppose it's a good time to remember that documentation is your best defense, but vigilance is your only real protection.
Later.
Bye.
Peace out.
Keep your logs tight and your eyes on the road.